Merry meet. In this video, we are going to weave ancestral reverence, civic empowerment, and spiritual insight into a living meditation on equitable consciousness. Invocation, the breath before the word. To speak of equitable consciousness is to summon a way of being that transcends mere awareness. It is not simply the act of noticing injustice, nor the passive recognition of difference. It is the embodied, intentional cultivation of a worldview in which justice is not an abstract idea, but a sacred obligation, where every breath, every ritual, every civic act becomes a vessel for healing, reclamation, and transformation. Equitable consciousness is ancestral. It is the whisper of those who survived, resisted, and reimagined. It is the echo of those whose names were erased, but whose wisdom remains encoded in the soil, in the bones, in the heirlooms tucked away in forgotten drawers. To awaken this consciousness is to remember, not just intellectually, but spiritually, ritually, and communally. The anatomy of awareness beyond inclusion. Modern discourse often frames equity as a policy goal, a checkbox, a metric. But equitable consciousness demands more than inclusion. It demands reconfiguration. It asks who built the table, who was never invited, who was forced to serve rather than to speak. To cultivate equitable consciousness is to interrogate the architecture of our institutions, our rituals, our language. It is to recognize that neutrality is a myth and that every system carries the imprint of its creator. It is to ask not only who is here, but who has been silenced, and what truths have been buried beneath convenience and comfort. This consciousness is not guilt-ridden. It is a grief literate. It does not wallow in shame, but honors sorrow as sacred. It allows us to hold space for the pain of history without being consumed by it. It is a practice of radical empathy, not as sentiment, but as strategy. Ritual as resistance, the sacred in the civic. For those of us who walk the path of magic, ritual is not escape, it is engagement. Equitable consciousness finds its heartbeat in ritual acts that reclaim space, story, and sovereignty. Whether through altar building, spellcraft, or spoken word, we channel ancestral wisdom into present day liberation. A ritual for equitable consciousness might begin with the naming of the unnamed. It might involve placing objects of memory, a grandmother's spoon, a protest sign, a torn photograph on an altar of reckoning. It might include invocations that blend civic language and sacred verse. Something like, by the power of those who marched, who mourned, who made a way out of no way, I call forth justice not as law, but as living breath. In this way, ritual becomes a civic act. It becomes a way to reimagine power, not as domination, but as co-creation. It allows us to see the Constitution not as static text, but as a spell in progress, one that must be rewritten with every generation's truth. Memory as map, ancestral navigation. Equitable consciousness is deeply rooted in ancestral memory. It honors the wisdom of those who lived in balance with land, spirit, and community. It recognizes that colonization was not just physical, it was epistemic. It stole not only land, but language, not only bodies, but cosmologies. To reclaim equitable consciousness is to become cartographers of memory. We trace the stories of our people, not to romanticize the past, but to understand the present. We ask, what did my ancestor know about justice, about reciprocity, about survival? How can their teachings guide my activism, my rituals, my relationship? This is not nostalgia, it is strategy. It is the act of rooting ourselves so deeply in ancestral truth that we cannot be swayed by the winds of performative progress. It is the act of remembering that liberation is not new, it is ancient. The communal flame, consciousness in coven. While solitary practices offer death, equitable consciousness thrives in community. It is a coven of voices, a chorus of truths. It is a recognition that no one is free until all are free, and that freedom is not a destination, but a rhythm. In communal practice, equitable consciousness manifests through shared ritual, mutual aid, and collective storytelling. It asks us to listen deeply, to speak bravely, and to hold one another accountable with love. It invites us to build stars, not only in our homes, but in our neighborhoods, our courtrooms, our classrooms. It is a practice of showing up, not just when it is convenient, but when it is necessary. It is the art of weaving spiritual insight into civic action, of turning protest into prayer, and prayer into policy. So the closing benediction, a spell for the future. Equitable consciousness is not a destination, it is a devotion. It is a daily choice to see, to feel, and to act. It is a sacred refusal to forget. It is a magical instance that justice is not only possible, it is inevitable. If we dare to dream it, speak it, and live it. So, let this video be a spell, a seed, a summons. May we walk with memory as compass. May we speak with truth as flame. May we build with love as mortar. And may our consciousness be not only equitable, but revolutionary. Blessed be.